Good morning. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Rooms like this are really, really critical for our industry. The opportunity for entrepreneurs, for technologists, for legislators, for educators, for companies like CHS to get together and begin to build a network, to build an ecosystem like we've talked about, and then to really leverage that ecosystem for the benefit of the industry is important. I thought I might spend a few minutes with you this morning talking about sort of trends, events that we see happening in agriculture, both domestically as well as on the global stage. And events and trends that I would argue are reshaping the future of agriculture. And reshaping it in such a way that this idea of innovation, this idea of technology is going to be absolutely critical to help this path forward in reshaping agriculture. So let me just share with you some of the things that we see, some perspective on some of these events that are going on around the world. And then, of course, I would love to entertain any questions at the break or this afternoon at the Grand Farm. If you'd like to talk further, or if you'd even like to maybe disagree or dispute some of the things that we see happening. First, briefly, CHS. So who are we? We're the nation's largest cooperative, about $48 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2022. Our business model is really pretty straightforward. So what we do is we provide the services and the products that are needed to plant an acre of grain. We then provide the services and products that are required as that acre of grain matures. At the end of the season, we come in and we buy that grain. We process that grain ourselves. Oftentimes, we process that grain through other parties, and the rest we ship all over the world. So that's really our role. I've been in this business nearly 30 years, and I can't think of a time when agriculture has been more important or a time when innovation has been more vital. Despite what some might think, agriculture is an industry that's been constantly innovative. It's an industry that's constantly evolved. In fact, since 1948, U.S. agricultural productivity has more than doubled. Farmers and ranchers have always found ways to be more innovative and increase yields and conserve resources, which is really the challenge I would offer to this room to help producers and help farmers on that task. We're more productive today. We'll be more productive tomorrow. The world's been complex, but I would argue the world is going to be even more complex for agriculture going forward. One reason for that is geopolitics are profoundly changing agriculture. If you look at what took place recently in the trade wars between the U.S. and China, trade flows absolutely shifted. Trade partnerships for grain absolutely shifted. Agriculture was caught right in the middle of that. The war in Ukraine, it's not only difficult to watch, but for folks in our business, you can't help but take notice that it's changing the way agricultural trade flows will occur. So these aren't the kind of trade issues that we've experienced in the past. This is really a new era of trade challenges for agriculture. Trade has always fluctuated, it's always changed, but the scope, the speed of change is much different today than it's been in the past. The reality is fewer acres are planted in Ukraine today, and it's hard to make up that volume on a global stage. But one place where that volume is being made up, and it's being made up in a big way, is Brazil. So we see Brazil emerging very differently as a global provider of corn. In fact, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is forecasting that this year, Brazil will export more corn than the U.S. It's only happened one other time in history. It happened back in 2012 when the U.S. was in a drought. It's likely, we would predict, that this is not a temporary solution or a temporary situation, that Brazil will emerge as a leading corn exporter, and in the years ahead will likely compete head-to-head with the U.S. and for corn exports. Corn is not the only story, though, when it comes to global grain trade. Wheat is also certainly changing. The price, let's see here, sorry. No Western grain distributors will operate in Russia, which means that private export facilities in Russia are now in the hands of the Russian government, which is creating for us all sorts of uncertainty around the way wheat will now flow and grain will flow out of Russia. But what has emerged through the war in Ukraine is Russia has come out as now the global leading exporter of wheat. So here we have a consolidated wheat position in Russia, and we have a growing position in Brazil on corn. New challenges for grain exports. So what does all this mean for a producer? So as a producer, between high commodity prices, higher input costs, drought, the volatility I just spoke about in terms of grain flow, it really has placed a premium on a grower's ability to manage their margins. In addition to that challenge, the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics has forecasted that jobs in agriculture, by and large, will be flat. We'll need about 141,000 job openings every year. However, they also forecast that there will be fewer people to fill those 141,000 jobs. So I would argue that farmers are absolutely going to need innovation. They're going to need automation. That's going to both lower their operating cost as well as allow them to grow and scale. Having said that, despite all these challenges, if you look at the year 2022, it marked the best year on record for inflation-adjusted net farm income since 1973. So maybe said another way, farmers have a strong balance sheet, and they're in a position to invest in innovation and technology for the benefit of their businesses. I think you can look for continued change at the farm gate as well and through the rest of agriculture. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, since the 2000s, the number of large crop farms with at least 2,000 acres of cropland have nearly doubled, while mid-sized farms fell by nearly half that amount. So I think you can appreciate the scale of farming is going to continue to change. Farmers are operating at a scale that will need autonomous innovation to help manage that increasing size. We also see a trend around sustainability, and we truly believe that consumers will navigate towards sustainability and our ability to provide farm-to-table processes. We see a great deal of investment going on in the agricultural space, specifically in this idea of sustainability and across the ag supply chain. And this idea of integrated global supply chains, digital supply chains will become more important for agriculture. But another component that we see that will become more important in agriculture is energy. And energy is going to play a more central role in agriculture because of renewable diesel. For those of you who don't know what renewable diesel is, it's essentially a chemically equivalent version of diesel, but it's produced with a different set of feedstocks. So think about animal fats, think about used cooking oil, but primarily soybean oil, because all of these have a lower carbon intensity score than traditional crude. So what does this mean? We're seeing significantly large investments in renewable diesel across our industry. Two trends that we're going to continue to monitor are, one, this idea of renewable diesel and how quickly that demand comes not only from the West Coast but begins to cross the country, as well as how quickly electric vehicles advance. So there's no question in my mind that this idea of agriculture and energy are also coming together and are going to reshape agriculture in the future. The strong demand for soybean oil for renewable diesel in the domestic market means that there's going to be less soybeans to export. I've even heard some forecast that the U.S. could end up becoming a net importer of soybeans in the year ahead. That would be quite a reshaping of the way ag grain flows across this globe. The movement of soybeans from the Midwest to the West Coast consumers will be a challenge for us, and I think an opportunity for greater transportation efficiency. On this idea of transportation efficiency, I'll just share with you that CHS, working along with Kratos, has a successful innovation proof of concept on platooning. We run trucks back and forth between two of our soybean processing facilities on a regular basis in this autonomous vehicle sort of proof of concept. So I'll leave you with this. As we sit here today, I think the job of the U.S. farmer has never been more important. Farmers are dealing with greater complexity, increased operational scale, new demands on both a domestic and a global supply chain, and absolutely a need for innovation to solve a number of these challenges. So thank you for your time.